Well, once again, thank you all so much for joining me today for the Your Summer, Your Success session. Today, we are going to be talking about the many forms of teamwork and leadership. I would love for this to be a very engaging session for each one of you. So as we move throughout this presentation, if you have questions, comments, or anything that you would like to add, please feel free to unmute yourself and join in on the conversation or to ask whatever questions that you might have. And I'm happy to allow you that space and opportunity, okay? So as we get started with this, just another friendly reminder, the session is being recorded and you can just drop your name, number into the chat box so that we can record your attendance for today. So just to give you a brief overview of the objectives for today, we are going to talk about and understand the difference of teamwork and leadership and the correlation between the two. We're going to identify the many forms of leadership and culture and how culture affects it. So this part of the session will give you a really good opportunity to reflect on what is your particular leadership style and how you like to incorporate leadership in the type of work that you want to do. We're also going to talk through building a team foundation, gaining self-awareness of your own qualities and experiences, and then we're going to use some time at the end to help you learn how to articulate those experiences. So I know Erin said that she has an interview coming up, so we're going to walk through some strategies of how you can first identify what your leadership style is and come up with those powerful stories that you can share with employers and individuals that you're networking with to demonstrate your leadership and teamwork capacity. So we're going to practice and we're going to set those goals for ourselves today. Okay, so before we start with definitions, I would actually love to hear your personal definition of what is teamwork and leadership.
So teamwork for me is like we have a common sense of what can be achieved on a certain date, like a due date, and like everyone is contributed a certain part of the project. And like everyone help each other and obtain the object.
Okay. Yeah, awesome, thank you. Would anyone else like to share?
Okay. Yes, I think that was good, but just to add to it maybe, I think leadership within that common mindset of a team looks like taking individual responsibility for the team's success even. So I think leadership has a lot to do with accepting responsibility, but not necessarily going it alone, you know, like it involves teamwork as well to be a leader.
Absolutely. So I'm hearing common goal, common vision, teamwork, and responsibility are all aspects of what we think of when we think about teamwork and leadership. So that's excellent. So the definitions that we have here for leadership is the action of leading a group of people or an organization. Okay, that's the broadest definition possible. And so that's why I always like to ask you all what your personal definitions are, because there is just this broad definition of leadership, and oftentimes leadership looks different and is defined differently based on your upbringing, based on your personal experiences, and based on some of the professional experiences that you've had within your time as a leader as well. What I like about this little chart here is that it shows some different aspects of what it means to be a quote unquote good leader, right? So things like clear communication, vision, setting a good example, having integrity, recognition, giving encouragement, focusing on inspiring others, and focusing on teams' interests and needs. All of those play a role in how various people think about the characteristics that define what it is to be a good leader. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that too in regards to your own personal vision for good leadership. And then, of course, with teamwork, I like to talk about leadership and teamwork simultaneously because you're right. You know, while a leader takes on the positionality of leadership of a team, it's very important for that leader to understand the dynamics of their team and be able to collaborate with their team members in order to work towards that shared common vision. So for teamwork, it's the combined action of a group of people, especially when effective and efficient. So all of those things are very important for a leadership to be mindful of when working with their group. So I want you to take a moment and I want you to write down 3 qualities that help you as a leader and 3 qualities that help you as a team member. So write down or just think about those 3 qualities that help you as a leader and the 3 that help you as a team member. All right. Did everyone get a chance to jot down their 3 qualities or 6 in total? Okay, fabulous. Now I want you to keep those in mind because now I want to talk about some different forms of leadership. And I want you after this to think through if those 3 qualities are in alignment with what you see as your type of leadership that you embody. So here on the screen, you see that there are 5 different forms of leadership. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list. These are just kind of some of the more prominent, popular styles of leadership that you will find. So the first one listed here is servant leadership. So this kinds of leadership prefers power sharing models of authority, prioritizing the needs of their team and encouraging collective decision making. So someone who categorizes themselves as a servant leader is someone who is really prioritizing the needs of the people that they are leading. It's very important for them to encourage that collective decision making within their leadership. For this second one, you see it is transformational leadership. So this one inspires staff through effective communication and by creating an environment of intellectual stimulation. So this one, and a lot of these individuals will say, well, I see myself in multiple types of leadership. And that's how I feel about this transformational one, because this one is all about innovation. It's all about inspiring action. It's all about effective communication and creating an environment that allows this kind of stimulation of creativity to get to some effective solutions to whatever the group is trying to tackle. This third one is transactional leadership. So this is focused on group organization, establishing a clear chain of command and implementing a carrot and stick approach to management activities. So you can see with the transactional one, this one sometimes I think about is more prioritized with creating that chain of command, but also making clear what expectations are and creating deadlines, creating tasks that are very important for people to get done in order to accomplish the mission of that particular group. So number 4 is autocratic leadership. This one is a more extreme version of transactional leadership. Autocratic leaders have significant control over staff and rarely consider worker suggestions or share power. So this one has a little bit more of an authority over the individuals that they lead. There are some contexts and some environments where this kind of leadership is just automatic because there is certain goals and objectives that have to be enforced within that particular group. So oftentimes these autocratic leaders will just take over all authority in terms of decision making and have that control over staff to let them know exactly what is expected of them to get done. So then you see number 5 is the laissez-faire leadership, commonly used to describe economic environments. It literally means let them do in French. This is typically translated to let it be, very hands off. So this is kind of the leadership where, maybe you don't always see the leader around. Maybe, you know there is some form of leadership, but it isn't always clearly there. Right. And so this one is like a little bit more hands off, very much disconnected from the particular group. So with these different types of leadership, I would love to hear from you if any of these are resonating with you. Maybe it's one that's really resonating with you or multiple that are resonating with you.
So I can start. So I think I'm more like a transactional leadership. Like when we do group project with people, like maybe 6 people, because some people like slack off, some people are like over devoting, but the grades assigned are the same. So I would like to like give everyone equal distribution. Like you do this part, I do that part, and we will set a very clear deadline for by when should we accomplish these assignments and by when should we review them and discuss them. Like if someone uh, didn't finish their assignments due to some other reasons, I think I have some tolerance, but I just need to know why. Like, is there some accidents or something like that?
Gotcha. Wow, that's a really great description of how transactional leadership shows up in the way that you provide leadership. That's awesome. Have you ever found that you've had to change your transactional leadership style based on the group dynamics?
I think like sometimes I transform to the transformational leadership. Like I was in a group that there's a minority in a group that rarely chats and discuss the questions with us. So like I try to encourage them by like use very friendly language to like just encourage everyone to engage in, just to let that person don't feel left out. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Would anyone else like to share a leadership style that resonates with them?
So I guess one quick example would be, I guess, servant leadership. I found this most predominant actually playing sports. So I'm in a co-ed rec league soccer team with my brother and dad. Well, prior to the pandemic, I guess. Now that everything's shut down, but so I did soccer and then also basketball. And while I wouldn't say I embody the principles of servant leadership, just being on a team, and even though it's just rec league, we're all trying to win. So everyone's trying to do a specific role on the team just to try to get the W. So I saw that as a direct example.
Awesome.
I think I also resonate with the servant leadership, but transformational and laissez-faire also kind of stood out to me. I think it depends on, I'm a very trusting person when it comes to a team. I trust that with inspiration and good communication that a team will, people will like be responsible and do their part. But at times I think it might take an extra, extra communication, and even some of, I enjoy being an encouraging and serving kind of leader where I'm giving people the resources to succeed as opposed to, like commanding them to do what I think is success, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you both so much for sharing. So let's go back to the 3 qualities that you wrote down as a leader and 3 qualities that you wrote down as a team member. And if you're comfortable, could you share those with the group and talk a little bit about how those qualities might help you within your particular leadership style?
So I guess I can start. Well, one quality I wrote about teamwork, I guess, is clear vision. So one of the startups we're working on right now, it's really much in the brainstorming phase. But one of my brother's friends does infrastructure, like in technology. So we're gonna eventually try to bid for contracts to try to oversee that. And so one big aspect we talk about is clear vision, knowing what our goals are, culture. so that we have a good company culture, so that everyone's on the same page and knows what they need to do. And then also I mentioned interdependence, where everyone can rely on each other. Like what Brad was saying about trust, that if everyone trusts each other, everything can be a bit more harmonious.
Yeah. And how do you think that helps you with servant leadership?
So right now it is very much in the brainstorming process, but hopefully eventually we'll be able to, when we're actually like doing work, hopefully I'll be able to do stuff that helps everyone else. But right now it's still very much up in the clouds.
Gotcha. Okay. But it sounds like, since you are in that brainstorming process, that there is this collaboration of sorts that's happening that allows for this collective vision sharing, that allows for an opportunity that when you do move forward with decision making, that everyone has a role in that. Would that sound
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Awesome? That's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to share how their qualities would help them in their leadership style?
Yeah, I think I can do the next one. So I think I list initiative, tolerant, and strict as my 3 characters as a leader. My initiative begins as I usually like to take the first step to begin the conversation, like just let everyone know each other and list out all our available time during the week regarding class schedule, and we will find a common time period that we can work on every week. And then we will distribute some discipline for our team, how to prevent lack of some rules to prevent that. Yeah, if it happens, how do we change our strategies? I think actually it was the strategy was assigned by one of my professors. She lets us to rate each other team members performance, maybe once per month. And I think I have used the system in our team, but in a more a close way rather than just do the anomalous rating. And the second. And the initiative have helped us obtain the clear vision and what he mentions, the culture of what kind of project can be delivered. And the second trait I mentioned is the tolerance, which means I can understand each other. Each person have their difficulties, may have their situations. So I would like to take some private conversation with them if their project is not in the timeline or the deadline we assigned. I think it's been helpful for keeping track of everyone's mental and work progress. And the third trait is strict. It's kind of opposite to tolerant, but I think it's I think time is most important thing for everyone. So I don't want to waste each other's time, and I hope others respect my time as well. So I think for some situations, we set a very strict deadline. I still wish everyone to obtain this assignment, and because I may have my personal life and I don't want other people's a situation, I mean unreasonable situation to interrupt my work-life balance. So that's been pretty helpful, my transactional leadership type.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It does sound like your qualities are very much situated to allow for you to successfully organize a group towards a common goal, because that's what like the transactional leadership is all about. Like there's organization, there's a clear chain of command, there are clear expectations for everyone, and there is organization that allows that room for successfully tackling those tasks for your group. But I also did hear some servant leadership in there too. So it sounds like you're very attuned to the needs of your team members. So you mentioned that if something comes up with a team member that doesn't allow them to complete your task, that you'll have a private conversation with them to kind of recognize and understand what it is that they need in order to be successful. So I heard some bits of servant leadership in there as well. So I think that those qualities will allow you to really do that effectively. So I would encourage you to keep those. I think that's really awesome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And then Brad, did you want to share?
Sure. First of all, that was really great, guys. You both have a really good understanding of your leadership styles. I think that's awesome. So I think I had 3 qualities as a leader I had written down were responsibility, advocacy, and empathy. And I think that, thinking about it now, I think that falls in line well with servant leadership. I tend to be an advocate for others, and I enjoy empathizing with their needs and setting them up for success, for the team's success at large. But then I think that I'm well-rounded with responsibility as well, and that when I need to step in and take more kind of transactional steps and move the team forward in like moments of indecision, then I can do that too. And I tend to be resourceful in that way, I think.
That's excellent. And it sounds like when you are a leader who is very much prioritizing servant leadership, that takes a lot of responsibility in itself, because you are very much making it a priority to understand each one of your team members, which could be a lot in itself, but which can also be very much appreciated by the people that you lead, because you can make more of a tailored approach that meets their needs. And for a lot of people, that allows them room to be successful when their leader believes and invests time, effort, and resources into them, so that when that transactional leadership inspires you to do some more organization, people are now like inspired through your leadership because they know that you believe in them. So I really value that as well. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Okay, so now that we've talked about your personal qualities, we've talked about some leadership styles, I wanted to take a moment to talk about how personal culture affects leadership. So with each one of us, we all have our own background and experiences that help to kind of shape our worldview, and that help to kind of shape the way that we see teamwork in leadership. And though all of those things are very important, and they're very much individualized. And so it's important for us, as all of us as leaders, to be mindful of each one of our team members and the worldview and perspectives that they bring to our teams as well. Because I believe that some of the best leaders in the world are people who recognize, prioritize, and value diversity, equity, and inclusion, and provide space and opportunity for different people to come together through an intercultural lens to solve problems within their particular team. So, you know, there might be some individuals on your team, or there might be other leaders that you're working with who have a different method or a different approach to something that is very different from you, right? But when you understand how culture affects leadership, you can navigate conflict in a way that is productive for you all to get to a place where you can get to some solutions. I think oftentimes individuals who don't have this understanding around how culture affects leadership, conflict becomes a very difficult thing to address as a leader, because you don't have an empathetic lens for the other person that you're working with, or you're not even trying to understand the worldview that they're bringing to that particular situation. So I just wanted to take a moment to point that out, that as you are thinking about your own leadership, as you are being put in positions where you are taking over the influence of a group of people, or as you're working with other leaders, be mindful of the worldview that they bring to your particular leadership or to your particular group, and understand how that might shift some of the group dynamics and how you envision yourself addressing those particular group dynamics. Okay. So now that we've talked more extensively about leadership, I want to take an opportunity to dive into the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team model. And I think some of these ideas that are listed here will kind of help you understand your role as a team. It will help you understand how you can build a solid foundation, and it can help you think about stories where you've actually done this, so that when we get to the point where we're going to start talking about how to talk with employers, you'll have some of those memories readily available for you. So you can see this pyramid here starts with the bottom of the foundation is trust, right? I think many of you talked about that earlier today, how trust is very important for both leadership and teamwork. If you don't trust that the people on your team are going to show up and that they're going to deliver, you might constantly be taking over the work of someone else, right? Because you don't trust that they're going to do the work to your particular standards, or that they're not going to deliver within a particular deadline. And so sometimes when leaders don't have this certain level of trust, they end up taking on a lot of work because they don't trust that their team members are going to be able to do it, right? Or if you are a team member within a group and you don't trust that someone else is going to deliver, you might be constantly thinking about the implications that that might have on the work that you're doing. Right. So it's important for every team, as you are in that forming stage within your team, to do activities and to have conversations that allow you to build trust. That might look like doing some icebreaker activities, learning about the personality styles of your different team members. That might also look like really having an understanding of of the different team members' culture and their background, so that you can have that contextual understanding of how they show up to their particular work. And it also might provide you with an opportunity to do some professional development with your team, so that you all can again be on one accord to have that trust foundation. So after trust, you see on this pyramid, there's conflict, okay? Because conflict happens in every group that you're going to be a part of. Conflict is a spectrum too. So conflict can start off as something as simple as, you know, we all can't agree on a time to meet, okay, right? So then we have to figure out schedules and things of that nature. And conflict can go all the way up to 2 people literally having a moral and ethical dilemma between how each one of them believes that a certain thing should be solved, how they believe that a certain project should be tackled, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes these things can be more group oriented. Sometimes they can be more on the individual level. So for you as a leader, for you being part of a team, it's important for you to understand your lens through which you will tackle productive conflict, because conflict can actually be good for a group. Because through conflict, you start to learn more about each other, and you start to learn more about how you can tackle things as they arise. So when you're going into your job interviews, I want to encourage you to think about conflict, because employers are going to want to know how you personally deal with conflict. It's actually a very common interview question as well. So if you can think back on a story or a time where you had to deal with conflict, maybe it was a course assignment, maybe it was a student organization, and how you particularly dealt with that particular conflict, that's going to be really good for you. And all conflict is going to allow you to really understand more about you as a leader. So it's important for you to kind of really reflect on that as well. And I would encourage you to, if you're a person who is uncomfortable with conflict, to meet with a career coach. And that's something that we can talk with you about regarding like how to deal with conflict in a professional setting, because it will come up. And then you also see that there is commitment, right? So this one is important. You have to honor your commitments. You have to commit to the things that you said that you are going to do, because without commitment, that really can't trickle back down to the trust. So it's important for you to kind of really stick to the decisions that you've made and actually deliver on those results as well. And then of course, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's important to hold each other accountable. A group cannot be effective. A group cannot get to a common shared goal if we are not holding each other accountable to complete the deliverables that we have committed to. And then of course, at the top, every group wants to deliver results, right? And in order to be able to do that, you have to have accountability. You have to have commitment, conflict, and you have to start with trust. So as a leader, when you're going into a group, especially when you're starting off new within a particular group as a leader, think about how you can build this foundation that can lead to your team results. So So now that we've talked about teamwork, we've talked about leadership styles, we've talked about our leadership qualities, I want to spend the rest of the time talking about job interviews and networking and how you can share stories regarding your leadership and your teamwork as well. So who has ever heard of the STAR method? Fabulous. Do you want to tell us what the STAR method is?
Sorry, who did you ask?
You. I think I think I only saw your hand.
Oh, it was just my hand? I didn't know. Okay. Yeah, the STAR method is just, I mean, it's on here, but it's a way of sharing a relevant experience of mine with the potential employer, or typically in a way that kind of highlights what was the problem or conflict, how did I react in a productive way, and what were the results, and even how can that be beneficial to your company. I think so. It helps highlight action and results.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's perfect. Yeah. With employers, they oftentimes will tell us that some of the top career readiness competencies that they love to see in recent graduates and within undergraduate students is teamwork, collaboration, and leadership, right? They want to hire someone into their team that's going to be able to effectively collaborate and work within a team environment. Because most, if not all, jobs that you will ever have will have some type of teamwork component to it. And they want to be able to trust that you're going to be able to contribute to that team environment. They also want to know, are you someone that they can promote within their company to have positional leadership? Are you someone who can provide a leadership lens to the work that you're going to be doing, right? And the only way through an interview process that you're going to be able to do that is by answering behavioral-based interview questions, which are typically questions that allow an employer to hear about your past experiences, to kind of hypothesize how you will act in the future should they hire you within their organization. So when you're answering these behavioral-based questions, these behavioral-based interview questions, the STAR method allows you to kind of organize your answer so that you're describing the situation, you're articulating what the task was that was inherent in that particular question that they're asking you. You're able to articulate the action steps that you personally took in regards to that interview question, and then you're wrapping it up by talking about the end results of that and what you learned from that. And like Brad said, how that can allow you to contribute to this new work environment that you're currently interviewing for. So I always encourage students to practice this process so that when you're going into an interview or into a networking opportunity, you have these stories that you can kind of pull out and go through the STAR method to share with employers to really market yourself. So what I want us to do is I want to take some time to practice with each other. Now, we don't have an equal amount of folks, so we can just kind of do this all together. So what I want you to do, I'm going to have you take about 3 to 5 minutes, and I want you to think about this question. I want you to tell me about a time when you had to deal with conflict in a team. Right? And what I want you to do is I want you to use the STAR method to answer that question and think about a time when you had to deal with conflict in a team environment, and use this situation, task, action, and result to write down your particular answer to this. And then I want us to practice with each other telling that story. So I'm gonna give you about 3 to 5 minutes to write that answer down to that particular question, and then we'll practice together. Okay, does that sound good? All right, is everyone ready? Awesome. Okay, so who wants to share what they came up with how they deal with conflict in a team environment and how you use STAR to tell that story?
I can start us off if you like. I hope it's a good example, but I did my best.
Okay.
So being staff for a nonprofit ministry at Ohio State. We have sometimes, or pretty often, organized outreaches where we can have genuine conversations with students on campus, typically in or around dorms where we lead student leaders in those dorms, because we have certain values that we think others might appreciate and like to share, and we have events that others could learn from. We sincerely believe. Last year, while working for the ministry, we decided to kind of start from the ground up for planning a certain ministry or certain outreach week, which typically has been every semester we organize an outreach week that would be a lot of inviting to a very large event that we hold where people could come and hopefully get helpful information. But there was a problem with that. It seems that we're not quite hitting people where they, we're not really meeting people's needs because the attendance had been decreasing over the years. So anyway, we decided to take a different approach, but different approaches were debated among staff with crew. And we were pretty indecisive as to what might be the best approach because we hadn't tried any, right? It seemed, there was inherently some risk in whatever decision we might take. And so it was easy to be indecisive. I think we needed to settle the task we needed to do was to settle on an appropriate approach to reaching out to the community with our values and having genuine, kind conversations with people on their own values too. So I suggested we simply involve some of the student leaders because we have the staff lead many student leaders on campus who then sort of have ownership of their own outreaches on campus as well. So I suggested we involve those student leaders in the decision-making process to diverge a little bit and hopefully through collaboration and conversation converge back into good ideas that the students themselves could take ownership of. And I think giving the students we-led ownership did help them to buy into the outreach week more so than they would have done without that greater ownership. And so the results were more of the student leaders actually gave up some of their precious time during a busy academic week to have outreach conversations with people on campus. And they had a lot more fun with it because they had kind of planned what they wanted to do together. And even though they didn't all agree on the exact approach, the fact that they were all involved together, this small group of students, it was really a specific part of campus that they were able to buy in and I think enjoy the teamwork a little bit more.
Awesome. So were you able to see an increase in attendance rates after implementing this idea?
So we completely changed the approach of outreach week. So instead of inviting to a large event, we were inviting more so to smaller gatherings, a hangout, and some open forums which were dialogues within the dorms that students hosted. So it's kind of a different. I can't really compare the numbers, of like a several hundred student event to the dorm room with 5 to 10 students having a conversation. But I believe there was we were able to engage students more personally through this approach than would have been true for a large event where a student can come and sit down and leave without ever talking to anybody.
That's wonderful. So it sounds like through this method, through the action steps that you took, you actually were able to realize that there was maybe a flaw, a flaw in how you've previously done events, and you come up with a new strategy and a new approach to having more intimate conversations regarding your vision through your organization.
Mm-hmm. That's
That's
right.
excellent. Yeah. So when you're talking about your results part of your answer, when you talk with an employer, those are the kind of things that you really want to share. So like, what was the
Okay.
ultimate result of that? So while while the student leaders felt more that they had more buy-in into this process, what actually happened as a result of that, right? So
Oh, I see.
an increase in attendance, but there was a new approach to building more genuine connections with your audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's phenomenal.
Okay, thanks.
Love it. Thanks so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Would anyone else like to share?
I can go next.
Mm-hmm.
2 summers ago, I started working at Van Heusen, and with me there was somebody else that was also hired, and we had very different approaches when it came to like how we went about our job. Half of our job was specifically like just folding clothes, doing inventory, and like selling stuff, but the other job was like very close customer care. Um, the way I approached it was a 60-40 situation where I like put more value into customers, and then like once they were gone, once I was done like helping them out, I would go and fold stuff in the rest of my time. My coworker, he was 80-20, but he was very little, he wasn't really concerned about like what customers wanted past like what they came in for.
Mm.
The customer care just wasn't there and wasn't like a big priority for him. And at first I heard like some of the managers like start talking about like they didn't like his approach. So I talked with him and I was like, okay, I know I overvalue customers a bit, and like you overvalue like your like work oriented stuff. So we went back and forth. I was like, I'll try to focus more on like the actual work if you want to try to focus more on the customer care part. And after a week or two, I realized that he was still in the same exact spot. Like he spent more time with customers, but he still wasn't really valuing customer care and customer value when it came to the company. And so I pulled him aside, we talked about it, and I realized that it wasn't that he didn't really care about customer value, it's that he didn't have the experiences and like the knowledge on how to deal with customers. And so I had him shadow me. Like when there weren't any customers, we just both worked on like folding clothes and stuff. But when somebody came in, I would kind of have him with me when I went to tackle every situation. And I'm a more social person. And so like as I was talking to him, I was like telling him like this is something you should notice, you know? If the customer walks in and they're like looking around, like very like specifically like at specific departments, then you know they're looking for something very specific. If they come in and they're just like looking all around, they're just browsing. And so like you have to like know all these like little things. And when you're talking to them, if they seem like more, if they seem like you're being intrusive, then like try to back away, just like guide them like, oh, I'm here if you need help, but like don't like, force yourself into the conversation. And so like we did that little by little. And I think at the end of like 2 months, he started focusing more on it like 50-50. And then we like met a lot of like the department goals, and we even won like a district competition. And yeah, it was just like working with people of like different skill levels, like different varied experiences.
Oh, that's a really great story. So was it, quick question. So was it your responsibility to help him through this process, or did you just take the initiative because he was part of your team and you wanted him to be successful?
I took the initiative.
Wow.
I saw that like we were great as like our store was like doing pretty good in terms of numbers, but I saw that like we could be doing better. And so I went on my way. I was like, hey Daniel, like, I know I focus more on this. I know you focus more on that. Like we should find some middle ground so we can like both increase efficiency in how we do things.
Wonderful. What I love about your story is that you took the initiative to help a fellow coworker. And not only did you take the initiative to help a fellow coworker, but you didn't try to impose your value system holistically on your team member. You just wanted them to demonstrate their efficiency because that was a part of the company's values, right? And the managers, it sounds like they were having conversations about this individual. So it was going to be important for your team member to be more effective with the customer care part in order to impress the managers as well, and to be able to contribute to the success of that company. That's phenomenal. You should be very proud of yourself. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, use that story in an interview. That's impressive.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Okay, so we have about 2 minutes left, but we can certainly take another example if anyone else wants to share.
Okay, I don't think it's a pretty good example, but I will try. Maybe I can like modify it in my interview. So I was having group project about the company structure analysis on Samsung, Sony, and Apple involved my economics class, and we have 6 people. And the professor assigned us alphabetically, so it's kind of interesting. 5 of us were Chinese, and 1 of them are like Korean, because like because of our last name is like all starts with L. So the 5 of our Chinese students, they prefer chatting in Chinese, like in our familiar like app called WeChat, but I think like it's kind of not respectful if we use the WeChat like and ask the other person to download the WeChat. So I suggest everyone to use a GroupMe, and it's okay at the first, but then I find there's an interesting thing, like the other Chinese students in my group aren't like that kind of engaging talking in English, and I think maybe it's because they're more comfortable with speaking Chinese in like if you're with people from your country, you're more likely to speak your mother language. And I find they're kind of non-responsive, so it's kind of hard because our project is due in like 1 month. So then I find a strategy, because a couple of people talk to me. So if can we like set a can we chat in Chinese in WeChat and tell the other Korean person to what happens. I feel so struggled, and then I find there's a better way to do this. So because we need to deal with 3 companies, Samsung, Sony, and Apple, and we decide 2 of us as a small group within a large group, and I asked the Samsung, one of the Chinese person in the Samsung group, to reach out to the Korean students. So in this way, their little project is like keeping on track within 2 of us, and I just need to focus on 3 parts instead of 6 people. So it's kind of make it easier for everyone to keep in track in the process. And I feel like after we use WeChat, everyone else is like responding very actively. So the project has a very good grade, and our professor give us pretty high like rates. And I think there's a lot of situations that I cannot tackle the different preference between my team members. So it's kind of, there's no perfect way, but sometimes I had to sacrifice something for the other. But I think for the general good, I made a very good strategy, and everyone is happy with it. And I think it's something I can transfer to my company culture, because it will be a very like diversified company with people from different ethnic groups. And I respect everyone's choice, and I think I can compromise away for a lot of problems.
Thank you so much. Wow. So there's a lot of things that are heard from your story that make me really enjoy your response. So you recognize that there was almost this inclination for part of your team to kind of separate from one individual based on a language preference. but you understood that as part of a team, that that person might feel isolated if we kind of do something on our own with a different language without including them. And so because you wanted to meet the needs of everyone, you kind of recommended a strategy that would allow for the project to be broken up into different parts for individuals to tackle it so that everyone could be included in that. What I really like about your particular answer with the STAR response is that you made sure to connect it back to the company. So you talked about the end result. You said, okay, so we were able to finish our project. We got a good grade on it. And this is what I learned from this particular experience. I understand that there's never going to be a perfect solution to a conflict like this in a team environment. But I recognize that the value and the qualities that I hold is that it's important to let all voices be known and to include everyone. And I want to bring this to your work environment. Excellent. Excellent. When you can connect it back to the company or the organization in your interview, that's going to allow that employer to really connect to your story and visualize how you're going to respond in that situation within their company. Brilliant. I love it.
I still feel like it's not a good strategy. So how could I modify that? Because at first I was suggesting everyone use GroupMe. Yeah, we did use, but like not everyone is kind of not that responsive. So we have no other way but have to switch back to WeChat and ask one of the like Chinese student to reach out to his Korean like little Samsung like a group. So in this way, he is still a little isolated. I don't want this, but like that's what other people want. So how could I modify this in the interview?
I think what you can do is you can still tell the story how it actually happened, right? And you can talk through or expand upon what you started to say. So you started to say, I understand that there's no perfect solution to a situation like this. However, through trial and error, we were able to kind of figure out a strategy for that given moment. But what I learned from this is that sometimes, you know, it might be important to think a little bit more about the strategy. But given that, it sounds like given the time constraint that you were under, it was important to kind of come up with something quickly. So what you can just explain to the employer about your reflection process since that experience has happened and how you would react differently in the future if you feel very strongly that the solution that you came up with in that situation was not the best. Maybe reflect on it and maybe share with that employer, you know, I've thought about it since then, and if I was in that situation again, I would actually probably implement this idea. But also recognizing, I really like how you explained that there is no perfect solution, but at least you were taking the initiative to think through some creativity in terms of problem solving.
Thank you. That's pretty helpful.
And so I really like that question, and I would encourage the entire group to think about this too. In your interview, it's not about being perfect, right? It's not about describing a perfect situation to the employer, because the employer wants to know how you feel. The employer wants to know if there's been flaws in how you've been able to deal with something. The important part is to describe to the employer what you learned from that failure, because maybe you were in a conflict that you don't feel good about, right? Maybe that conflict didn't end in a positive way. You can still share that story with the employer, but tell the employer what you learned from that. Tell them how you plan to respond differently in the future based on your reflection from that situation.
I see.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you all so much for sharing and being engaged today. I really, really, truly appreciate it. I know that we don't have a ton of time left, but I did want to share with you that I will be sending this presentation out to you. So you will have access to these resources that are available on these slides, as well as some additional information about tools and resources that you can capitalize on through the Career Success Office as well. But before we wrap up, I did want to be able to give you opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. And I would say I can give about 5 more minutes if you have any questions that you want to ask. Okay, seeing none, I would encourage you, if a question does come to mind for you, if something does come up, please feel free to log on to Handshake to book an appointment with me, and I'm happy to spend a 30-minute appointment slot to work with you through whatever questions that you might have, okay? Excellent. Thank you all so very much. And I hope that you're able to attend some of the other Your Success sessions.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Good luck.
We
Thanks.
qualify for the
Thank you.
for the company's culture. Yeah. So sometimes it's hard to like figure out what the employee prefer, whether we're risk aversive or risk seeking. And like, so how do we find the balance point? How do we dive in how could we know more about the company's culture and the employer's initiatives when he asks the questions? For instance, I read an interview question. If you have a loan for $10,000 and you're in the process of reviewing it, and another for $20,000 that you have not heard from the customer, which one would you pursue to finalize? Yeah, I know it's not related to leadership, but I just want to say what kind of value qualities employers want to pursue in questions like this.
Yeah, I would say in order to like understand more about company culture, there's a number of different things that you can do to learn about company culture, right? So oftentimes companies will have a web page on their site that goes into their company mission, values, their company culture. They'll have a web page where maybe they've done some interviews with current employees that talk about their experiences. Oftentimes, some companies will have social media pages where they share different aspects of their company culture as well. So I would encourage you, if you have an interview coming up or if you're applying for an organization, to check out their social media, check out their web pages to see if they have any content specific to company culture that you can use to answer questions. Also, one of my favorite ways to learn more and get an insider's perspective about company culture is to do informational interviews. So through LinkedIn, you can find Buckeyes who currently work at those organizations and reach out to them to see if you can take maybe 15 to 20 minutes of their time to kind of pick their brain, and you can specifically ask them questions that get at company culture. So if there's something specific regarding culture in that company that you're interested in learning about, you can pick their brain and learn and get the insider's perspective, because that can give you greater context for when you're answering a question like that one.
Oh, I see. That's pretty helpful. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thanks for the question. That was a good question.